Okay, I've got for you today something different. People have been asking me to do some tactics videos, so this will be the first in a whole long series of tactics videos, I hope. And today it's a pretty big undertaking. It's actually, I'm going to look at an entire army's tactics. How do you build a tournament army? So this is an example of a tournament army that won me a Best General Prize recently at a local tournament. So I thought it's a good candidate to talk about, how to build an army. Mind you, this isn't like some greatest army ever or anything like that. I mean, it just happens to be a relatively effective army that I hope will showcase how to build an army and really talk about some of those strategies of how you go about, putting stuff together that will really work together well. Okay, first off is the Seer Council led by the Farseer. Why are they in this army? They're in this army because they can do multiple roles. They can do multiple things. They can either be an anvil. They can take the enemy's assault, and with their rerollable saves, good armor, reasonable toughness, they can actually survive a lot. They also have 4+ invulnerable saves each, so that's going to be rerollable on a fortune, which means they can even take on squads that have power weapons. Although, that's obviously not the most ideal target. Now, they can also be your hammer unit. They have strength 9 witchblades against vehicles. They automatically wound infantry or monstrous creatures on a 2+. They don't cut through armor saves, but I mean, you're going to be forcing so many saves that eventually they are going to start failing. So they can be effective in multiple roles. Because they fly, they can get to things very quickly. They can just be a massive threat on the board. They can draw a lot of fire. And even if they do get destroyed eventually, they'll usually cause a disproportionate amount of attention from the opponent, allowing the rest of your army, hopefully, to take objectives, blow up vehicles, slaughter enemy troops, and just win the game for you. So whether these guys are actually doing it themselves or helping you in other ways, they can be a very strong way to help the game be won for you. Generally speaking, yeah, you want to avoid things with 2+ armor saves if you're going to charge them, just because they're going to have that 2+ armor save. You're not going to cut through it. However, if you force enough saves, eventually even 2+, Terminator armor type saves will start failing. That is these guys over here. Don't be afraid to, get them shot up or lose them eventually if you can justify it by the amount of damage you cause. Alright, on to the Guardian Jetbike squad. Squad of 6. This is pretty much the smallest level of squad I would ever field in terms of jetbikes. You just can't field 3 jetbikes and expect them to survive or not surrender a kill point. But I really like squads of 6. I think they're pretty well point costed. They're pretty tough to take out. They're basically Space Marines, right? Toughness 4, 3+ armor save, and they can even give themselves a 3+ cover save if need be to get out of dodge. Their guns are surprisingly pretty effective. Don't forget that they are twin-linked, so even though you've got a ballistic skill of 3, you are re-rolling, and you get 2 shots out of each one. So if you get into short range, that's pretty sweet. Of course, you've got the Eldar jetbike move, which lets you move 6 inches in the assault phase. Don't forget that. That means if you fly into something, shoot it from 12, you fly away 6 to make sure that it won't be able to assault you unless it has fleet. Mandatory is you always take, in a squad of jetbikes, you always take your allotted number of shuriken cannons. You see I've modded mine over there. The reason for that is because the shuriken cannons really make these guys a multi-purpose unit. They can either just shoot up infantry, they can just fly around all games surviving and then hold objectives, or they can even shoot the side and rear armor of vehicles and blow them up. I mean, heck, if you're going against a Rhino, you might even be able to get a little bit lucky and blow it up straight on. The other thing is it also gives them a 24-inch shooting range. There's lots of games that I'll play that I won't even fire my 12-inch guns. I'll only be firing the heavy 24-inch range shuriken cannons because it gives you a massive range with that to actually threaten stuff without reprisal in many cases. So they're just a generally effective unit. Sometimes I'll reserve them. If I'm facing like an Imperial Guard army, I will reserve these guys and hope that they show up late and then they can hold an objective, maybe blow up a rear vehicle. If I'm facing an army without a lot of shooting, like Blood Angels, for instance, they don't have a lot of short range, or sorry, they don't have a lot of long range shooting, I will start them right on the field and just start shooting at stuff. Next, we have a look at the Dire Avengers, 2 squads. I really like small squads of Dire Avengers inside Falcons because the Falcons, we'll get to that in a second, but they protect them very well. With hollow fields, it's very unlikely the Falcons are going to explode. It's much more likely they'll just be wrecked, which means these guys are going to pop out at full strength. They also make the Falcons essentially scoring vehicles, which I'm sure you've seen before. A lot of Eldar players do that. In the terms of Exarch, I really like giving power weapon to the Exarch. So this squad has a power weapon and shimmer shield, just because these guys are my sort of close combat guys. If in God forbid, if I need to jump out and assault an objective, these guys could actually sort of do it. This is my more shooty squad because the Exarch's just been given 2 dual guns, so that way. I have something that's a little bit more shooty that I can throw down. Very cheap. They're about 100 points each. Pretty survivable because of the Exarch. The power weapon is great on this guy. Can really help out. Most importantly, they just stay inside the vehicles and try to become scoring units and hold out for the most of the game. The shooting on the Dire Avengers is actually pretty respectable. 18-inch range, 2 shots, hitting on 3s, strength 4, not too bad. Alright, now we come to the only elite choice in my army. Again, I love the elites in the Eldar army, but I just happen to not need them that many this game. I've got 5 fire dragons to help with anti-tank. They're the only things that have credible, that can really credibly hurt armor 14 in my army. And they are also extremely effective against Terminators, Space Marines, monstrous creatures, groups of Tyranid warriors. They'll insta-kill a lot of these things. Or at least force a pretty weak and vulnerable save on most of them. They're great against monstrous creatures. They're just multi-purpose unit. There's a reason why you see them in almost every Eldar army. They're just so useful, especially when they're taken to combat in either a Wave Serpent or more often I'll actually put them in a Falcon. However, this army is looking at them in a Wave Serpent. And you've got their basic transport. I've kept it really cheap, so just twin-linked shuriken cannons. And Spirit Stones. That's it, just so they can move armor. Of course, every Eldar vehicle needs to be given Spirit Stones. You're insane if you're not giving it Spirit Stones, because that means that the late game in an objective scenario, any one of your vehicles, as long as it's not immobilized, can contest. Very basic transport, cheap squad of guys, pop out, kill a vehicle, or slaughter some Feel No Pain troops, or maybe blow away some monstrous creatures, whatever the case may be. Moving on to the 2 Falcons in the army. I love Falcons. I know that some Eldar players, really prefer the Wave Serpents. You see like 6 of these in an army, but I really love Falcons. There's a couple of reasons for that. The first reason is that they're allowed to take hollow fields. Hollow fields means they're more likely to survive the battle, even if you get all your guns blown off. As long as you're flying around, you can contest objectives. If you have at least a gun or 2 left, you can fight, and most importantly, you can keep troops inside. That means that they become extremely resilient, very hard to kill off. So it means you're always going to be, you're always going to be contesting and a real threat late game. I love the pulse laser that comes with them. Extremely effective. 2 strength 8 AP, 2 shots. Awesome for blowing away, multi-wound things with toughness 4, blowing away things with Feel No Pain, even shooting down vehicles eventually. Now the way I've outfitted my 2 Falcons is I've given them both Eldar missile launchers as their secondary weapon because they happen to synergize extremely well with the strength 8 of the pulse laser. They're both strength 8, and more importantly, they both have a 48-inch range. So extreme synergy happening there. You can move 6 inches and fire both of them if you want, of course, because they're fast vehicles. And I've also outfitted them with the upgraded shuriken cannon on the bottom. Why have I done that? I know not everyone does that. I really, in this army, it's pretty tight. There's not a lot of models, right? I need every gun I can get. So these guys over here, being my primary gunboats, they're loaded to the teeth, armed to the teeth. I've got that extra strength 6 shot there. It really helps against infantry. If this vehicle, if one of these Falcons is forced to fire at a bunch of troopers, then I'm not just shooting super expensive strength 8 guns at them. I've also got some good strength 6 shots that were very cheap to buy. Very effective. Plus, it gives you extra weapons to in case things get blown up. Hollow fields I find is pretty mandatory on them in this type of army where I just have them holding 2 of my 3 troops. And of course, they have Spirit Stones on there. You gotta have that. And last but not least, we come to the fire prism. Just a single fire prism. I only own one so far, although I am feverishly painting up a second one. Some people can say, what's the point of taking a single fire prism? If you don't take two of them, you don't have that option of twin linking them. That's not really true, I find. A single fire prism can be extremely effective. Its main role is to kill heavy infantry. 9 times out of 10, I prefer to fire the small blast, strength 9 AP2, to just nuke things with feel no pain, multiple wounds, terminators, just, all that nasty, overpriced, super nasty, heavy infantry that you just don't want to see survive. Really good at killing that. It does have the large blast, strength 5 AP4 template. It is fine to kill things like, Hormagaunts, weakly armored stuff. I mean, even try to, hurt some Space Marine type things every once in a while. But I find I'm never fully satisfied with the small blast. It's always about trying to drop a direct hit with the small blast rather than the big blast onto something really nasty, especially troops. In a pinch, you can fire it at vehicles, but then it just becomes an extremely expensive las cannon. You do not want to do that too often. But I have fired it in a pinch, and hey, you might, if you get lucky on a 6, you'll blow up a Land Raider. But not going to happen too often, so don't expect it too much. Alright, talking about general tactics with this kind of army. Extremely mobile. You'll notice that everything is either inside a vehicle or essentially flies. It's got, jet bikes. Everything's hidden away. So extremely mobile. The deployment phase is really crucial for you because there's no reason for anything to have to stick together. You can bunch it all together, you can spread things out, but you have to be very careful to make sure that you can project power into a part of the board when needed. Generally speaking, I won't reserve too much in this army. It's a bit too small to really start reserving things and having them show up piecemeal. I will, however, regularly reserve these guys if it's the right army that I'm facing in the right scenario. Generally speaking, these Falcons are going to, they can play independently of each other. They're sort of your wild cards. This guy could be one side of the board, that guy another side of the board, as long as they're trying to go for objectives. Fire Prism will pick a corner, assuming that there isn't some outflanking happening, and will just stay far, far away, firing the big gun. These guys tend to stick with one of these two vehicles. A lot of times I will send them with the Power Weapon Exarch group, just because that way, if they do pop out and get assaulted, and if they survive, then the Dire Avengers over here have a chance to actually cut them out of that. Otherwise, the Seer Council has a couple of options. The first option is to just go straight up the middle against an army that doesn't have a lot of shooting. Just go right up the middle, go for the biggest target, tie up as many units simultaneously as possible, and just try to wreak havoc. The second option, if you're facing a very shooty army, is to put them behind your vehicles. So if you have 3 or 4 vehicles, stacked together, they sort of hide behind them. The idea being that because they're further back, your opponent might not focus on them right away. Of course, it'll be hard not to see them, but if you don't want them to get focused, then stack them behind the vehicles, because the vehicles are the ones that are closer up. They're actually firing at your enemy. Sometimes that works. Depends on when it works. Generally speaking, though, these guys are going to be your bread and butter. They're going to go after swarms. They're going to go after anything with a 3+ or worse armor save, with impunity. And the main thing is with these guys is to try to multi-charge vehicles with units in the same combat. Dump all your attacks onto the vehicles, get 1,000,000 glancing and penetrating hits, and then watch the opposing army just crumble as they have to lose combat by a zillion, right? Other than that, it's a pretty fast army, pretty maneuverable army. Stick together when needed, split apart when needed, and go for the throat. You don't have a lot of numbers. You don't have a lot of time to waste. You've got to literally cripple your opponent by turn 3 or 4, but you can survive and pull out maybe a late win or late tie if needed because you have that mobility. All right, hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.